What if the biggest drag on the U.S. national economy isn't, trade policy or some sudden geopolitical shock? What if it's the archaic, often nonsensical zoning map of your own neighborhood? That's the deeply provocative starting point for the intellectual journey we're embarking on today. We're taking a deep dive into Matthew Yglesias' sharp, polemical 2012 ebook, The Rent is Too Damn High, What to Do About It, and Why It Matters More Than You Think. And we're actually trying something new here. Discover a new, in-depth approach to book coverage with this extended summary. Unlike our previous focus analysis, this feature delivers a comprehensive overview tracing the intellectual roots, the key arguments, and the real-world impact of the subject. If you appreciate this expanded format and find it helpful, please let us know. Your feedback really does help shape future content.
And this whole deep dive is powered by something unique. You're experiencing a two-host AI conversation, specifically Google's Notebook LM, which is designed to give you a deeper, more dynamic summary than a traditional review ever could.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get into it. We're all used to hearing about high rent as a political rallying cry or, a sign of personal misfortune, but Yglesias completely flips the script.
That's the core claim right there. He takes what feels like this painful individual monthly expense and argues it's, well, almost a national security issue. The central argument is that high rent is not just an individual hardship or a local annoyance. It's a macro-level drag, a huge headwind on growth, on equality, and the overall quality of life in the United States.
So he's not just talking about the agony of finding an apartment in Manhattan. He's actually arguing that the inability to find that apartment is literally slowing down the entire nation's economy.
Precisely. The book is really a blend of policy argument, economic explanation, and urban planning commentary. And it's all written with this concise journalistic urgency. The setting is modern America, specifically those high-productivity coastal metros where all the economic action is. We're talking New York City, the Bay Area, Boston, Washington, D.C. These are places where the job markets are booming, but the housing supply has been, well, essentially frozen in time since the mid-20th century.
So the core factual claim he keeps coming back to is that rents are too damn high, mainly because local rules are preventing builders from adding enough housing where demand is strongest. I mean, that feels like an aha moment right away. The problem isn't some mysterious market failure, it's specific rules probably sitting in a binder in City Hall.
The underlying logic is pure economics. Supply and demand. Demand is incredibly strong in these productive cities. People want to move there for better jobs, higher salaries. But when that demand runs up against an artificially constrained supply, a supply that local regulations have just choked off, the only thing left to do is go up. Price. The prices for the few units available just skyrocket.
Okay, so if we're looking for the policy villains who created this scarcity, where does Yglesias point his finger?
He is very meticulous about detailing the specific land use regulations that act like economic handbrakes. It's not one big federal law. It's 1,000 tiny local restrictions.
Give us some of the greatest hits from this list of policy villains.
The list is surprisingly concrete. For instance, height limits, which cap vertical density even in downtown areas where tall buildings make perfect sense. Then you have minimum lot sizes, these rules that basically mandate sprawl by saying you can only build one house per acre, regardless of demand. Imagine a city where, say, 75% of residential land is legally restricted to just single-family homes, often based on decisions from 50 or 70 years ago. That's the villain he's talking about.
And these rules often inflate costs before a single worker even pours concrete. I'm thinking about the mandatory parking minimums he discusses. It sounds so benign, but forcing every new building to provide 2 or 3 parking spaces per unit adds massive costs, increases the project's footprint, and just makes walkable urban neighborhoods impossible.
Exactly. And that doesn't even get into the bureaucratic friction. The long, discretionary permitting processes. Builders can face years of uncertainty, environmental reviews, design reviews, all of which act as this massive tax on new construction. That uncertainty alone discourages developers from even starting.
And who is enforcing all these limits? This is where the political economy of NIMBYism not in my backyard comes into play, right?
It is the crucial human element. These restrictive rules give tremendous power to small groups of local residents, usually the incumbent homeowners. These groups get the power to veto or shrink projects that might change their neighborhood's character, or, more to the point, might slightly dilute their property values by adding more supply.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the book highlights this profound tension. These rules generate immediate local benefits for homeowners, higher property values, a stable neighborhood. But Yglesias argues these local perks come at a devastating cost to everyone else.
That's the conflict. It's individual neighborhood preferences versus collective national welfare. We see this contrast so sharply when you compare different American cities. You've got coastal metros like San Francisco and New York with huge job demand and severe limits, leading to crippling costs. Then you have sprawling Sunbelt metros like Houston or Dallas that add housing more freely, but that often comes with extreme car dependence, long commutes, and frankly, poor urban amenities.
So the fundamental problem, as he sees it, is that these local veto points block changes, like adding a fourplex instead of a single house, that would have massive aggregate benefits for millions of people.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact goes so far beyond your monthly rent check. The book argues that high rent leads to just profound economic dysfunction.
You mentioned the idea of spatial misallocation. We need to spend a moment on that because that's the key concept linking these boring zoning rules to national GDP figures.
It really is the critical insight. Spatial misallocation of workers happens when people are geographically restricted from moving to the places where they could be most productive. So imagine a brilliant engineer living in a mid-sized city earning, say, $60,000 a year. That same engineer could be working for a tech giant in Silicon Valley earning $150,000. But they can't make the move because the cost of housing would eat up all their wage gains, or even more.
So because a highly productive city like San Francisco or Seattle effectively charges a massive tariff in the form of rent to get in, most productive workers are stuck in less productive places.
Exactly. The country is underutilizing its most talented labor force. If housing were abundant and affordable in those productive regions, those workers would move, their individual productivity would soar, and critically, the national economy would benefit immensely. The lost potential GDP from this misallocation, according to some related analyses, is in the hundreds of billions, even trillions of dollars annually.
So this failure to build enough housing doesn't just reduce productivity, it directly amplifies inequality. If you're already wealthy and own property in a high-demand city, these rules just make you richer. If you're poor or middle class, you're priced out of opportunity. It's a systemic drag, creating a new kind of geographic caste system.
And the drag isn't just economic, it has serious environmental and social costs. When expensive central cities push households out to the far-flung suburbs, what happens? Congestion increases, commute times grow, car reliance skyrockets, and emissions go up. The book ties this back to the why it matters part of the title. We're exporting our infrastructure and pollution problems because we refuse to build up.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? Understanding these mechanisms is key to recognizing why city politics matter on a national scale. Zoning is economic policy, whether we call it that or not. And for a longer chapter-by-chapter exploration of these arguments, Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel for AI, book analysis, summaries, and critiques, offers content designed to inspire reflection and rational thought. It's also really valuable for aspiring authors.
With that diagnosis set high costs, driven by regulatory scarcity, all leading to spatial misallocation, the author naturally moves to the prescribed treatment.
The obvious politically popular response to high rent is usually rent control, or maybe targeted affordable housing programs that subsidize a few units. What's the book's position on those policies?
That raises an important question because Yglesias is critical of those approaches. He notes that while they sound humane, these policies do not fundamentally solve the core problem, the supply bottleneck. In fact, he argues that certain types of rent control can actively worsen scarcity by deterring new building or reducing maintenance on existing units. They're treating the fever, but completely ignoring the infection.
So the core remedy has to be attacking those restrictive local rules directly. But let me play devil's advocate for a minute. If we just eliminate zoning, won't that lead to rampant displacement of current residents? And won't it overwhelm the existing infrastructure, the schools, the sewers that were designed for single-family homes? That's the standard NIMBY defense.
That is the crux of the political fight. And Yglesias is realistic about it. His response is structural. He argues that displacement and infrastructure strain are problems that have to be managed, yes, but they are preferable to the bigger problem of economic stagnation caused by regulatory failure. The infrastructure strain is a symptom of success. A city that needs new sewers because people want to live there is doing something right.
But what about preserving neighborhood character or ensuring architectural quality? Doesn't upzoning just invite generic glass boxes and developments that destroy the feel of a historic area?
He really focuses on the economic freedom aspect. While aesthetic concerns are valid, the book argues they're often used as a kind of veneer to protect property values and exclude new people. The highest leverage solution, he concludes, is to radically liberalize local land use rules in high-demand metros, allow more construction, particularly multifamily housing, and encourage density, especially near transit.
So it's a political argument for an economic reform.
Absolutely. The author's final point is that changing local zoning, that seemingly most boring political decision, is one of the highest leverage economic reforms available today. It far outweighs the impact of many federal tax or trade policies that get all the attention.
And the book was certainly successful in popularizing this argument. It didn't just fade away after 2012.
No, it became foundational. It got a ton of attention in policy and economic circles and really helped formalize the idea that restrictive zoning and NIMBYism are central, quantifiable drivers of high housing costs and national inequality. It established the frame for what we now call the market urbanist viewpoint.
So the final takeaway for you. This short book makes a powerfully argumentative case that the solution to high rents, to congestion, even to national inequality might be found not in grand federal laws, but in seemingly boring local zoning board decisions. It's a compelling reminder that economic opportunity is intrinsically tied to geographic access. Click the link on screen for the in-depth book critique, subscribe, share this deep dive, consider purchasing the book via the link, and keep thinking rationally.
It forces us to ask, is the primary function of our city rules to facilitate opportunity, or is to protect the wealth of those already inside?
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.